wish I knew about O1 when I was struggling through H1B. The O1A can be renewed indefinitely, whereas H1B has a 6-year maximum limit if you do not have an approved I-140.
If I am someone who haven't got picked in H1B, or even regardless of that, I'm on my OPT and I'm like, I think my profile might be good enough to actually explore O1A.
When they're already on a day one CPT boat, they'll come to me. It's like, okay, we don't have any option. We need to go after O1. But now, since more people are like starting to get educated about this space, I will get people who are like, hey, Sahil, I have exhausted two H1B lotteries. I have one more left. So like, now I want to think about O1 and get started on O1. I just talked to someone who just graduated and has like all three H1B attempts left, but he was like, I want to join the program right now and prepare for O1 because I just don't want to do anything with like, the H1B lot. You have one more attempt left at H1B, your STEM equity expires XYZ. So if the H1B does not go through, then we can file for O1 and then for EB1-A.
Let's say if someone did run out of two options or two attempts of H1B, now they're on their last attempt. They have about a year left on their STEM OPT. Is that enough time for them to survive? Thank you, Sahil, for doing this round two of us talking visa stuff, immigration stuff. But again, for people who don't know you, maybe let's do a quick intro. Where are you from? What do you do? And fun stuff.
Yeah, my name is Sahil. Been on this channel, I think, once and like a few other times on Instagram and whatnot. But yeah, my name is Sahil. I'm an EB1-A recipient. Me and my wife founded Jinee, which is like a program that we run to like help people build up their profile for like talent-based visas and whatnot. It's a small community that we have created. And now the goal is to like help everyone out. Make sure like we talk about these visas as much as we can, give out as much information as I can. So yeah, that's like a little bit of like a brief about myself.
Yeah, and again, for people who are wanting to learn more about Sahil's journey and how he got EB1A, and of course, I am still love to talk about how you were test automation engineer and not a Nobel Prize winner. So just want to throw out there so people,
Yeah,
because as soon as I say that, people think like, oh my gosh, there's no way I will be qualified for this. So
yeah,
you can, if
yeah.
Sahil can do it, so can you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I started like as a test automation engineer, did some development as well. Eventually was like managing engineering. So absolutely, like none of these visas are like Einstein visas or like
Yeah, and you obviously went to the typical F1 route,
correct.
OPT,
Yeah.
three attempts of H1B, two attempts did not get it. Last attempt, you got it, but then got RFE for transferring, and all of that story is covered. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, you can watch that entire story about like how I struggled a lot. But yeah, honestly, I feel like the i- it's not easy. A lot of people also think like it's very easy to get
Yeah.
these visas, but at the same time, it's not what they like what we make of it. Like it's at the end of the day, it's these are all visas which have like certain requirements. If you meet the requirements, you can get the visa. If you do not meet the requirements, you do not get the visa. It's like an examination. You work, you prepare for it, and then you appear for the examination, and then you leave the results in the hand of USCIS in this case, not God.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so yeah, it's something which is definitely achievable. It's just that you need to like work towards it, and really work actively on it, put your time in it. If I can do it, others can do it as well, barring that they have a starting point and they put enough time and resources and prioritize this in their life as compared to other things. Because like when I was doing it for 3 years, it was like one of my top two or three priorities, like alongside my family and my career. So like, you have to be willing to put the time in, and it's definitely doable if you do.
Yeah. Cool. Today we want to talk about O1A. Again, I feel like it's a younger brother of EB1A. But you tell me more about it. Like for people who don't know anything about what is O1A and who would be eligible for this.
Yeah, so O1A is a non-immigrant visa. First and foremost, a lot of people have confusion around this. O1 does not get you a green card. It is not an immigrant visa. It's a non-immigrant visa designed for individuals with extraordinary ability in fields of like science, education, business, athletics. It's awarded to people who are in top percentile of their field and can demonstrate sustained national or international acclaim. Usually, like, eligibility involves like meeting at least 3 out of 8 USCIS criteria for like EB1-A, essentially. Sorry, for O1A. So O1A and O1B are like two different routes under O1. O1A is more for the people from the background of like sciences, and like O1B is more for like people from the background of the art. And at the end of the day, you need to satisfy three criteria that highlights extraordinary achievements. And then examples of these criteria would include like winning awards, or like authoring significant publications, help holding key roles, or contributing uniquely to your industry. All those different aspects like come into play, but that's like the very basic of it.
Hmm. What's the big difference between O1 and EB1A?
So EB1A, of course, like number one, it's going to be an immigrant visa. O1A is going to be a non-immigrant visa. In terms of like the requirements, essentially the criterias to show extraordinary achievements are exactly the same for both of these. The focus on final merits could be a little bit more in terms of like one of these visas, but at the end of the day, like the best example that I could give, it's like preparing for like your engineering examinations. That the way we used to do is like you prepare for your engineering exams, and like there is IIT and then there is AIEEE. One just has like a lower barrier. So like on a scale of 0 to 10, if I have to put it, probably EB1A is going to be like an 8 or 9, versus O1 is going to be like 5 or 6. Same criterias, but you just do not need that much volume in these criteria. So like
Hmm.
you don't need like over 10 research work. Maybe like 3 to 5 could be enough, but that's just an example. It's just like same criterias, less volume, less evidence is required in each
Yeah.
particular criteria.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, disclaimer, we are not immigration lawyer. So please consult one if you need an immigration advice. Okay. How is O1 different from H1B then? Like, is there any benefit of O1 versus H1B? And like in terms of eligibility process benefit, like, yeah.
Yeah, so I honestly, like, I love Owen as compared to H1B. I wish I knew about Owen when I was struggling through H1B. So number one, in terms of eligibility, the H1B is a lottery based visa for skilled workers with at least a bachelor's degree. The O1A, by contrast, is not a lottery based system. It is based on your skills, but again, it has like a little bit more of like a stricter eligibility and focuses on extraordinary ability. In terms of benefit, the O1A does not have an annual cap, unlike the H1B, which is limited to 85,000 visas annually, as we all know, and the struggle with it, and the recent controversies around it without going too much into it. The O1A can be renewed indefinitely, whereas H1B has a 6 year maximum limit if you do not have an approved I-140. And then O1A, in the past, most of the times what you have seen is like initially you get it for 3 years and then you get a 1 year extension. But we are seeing more and more 3 years extension. I even like posted about it last week, where USCIS like issued a new guidance that 3 years extensions are going to be possible, and like will be much more common as compared to in the past. So one great thing about O1A is going to be you do not need an approved I-140. You basically can keep extending it for like over 6 years, as long as you can show that you're continuing to work in the field that you applied your O1 for. And in terms of process, with H1B you require like sponsorships and labor condition approval, all those things. O1A, you do not need an LC or anything of that sort. You basically use like the form I-129, and you use that to submit your petition.
Hmm. And I believe O1, you technically don't need like an employer to sponsor. You can get it sponsored through employer, but then also you could have like almost like a self-sponsored way. Again,
Yeah,
it's not like literally self-sponsored, but
yeah, this is a very good question, which like a lot of people have doubts on. Technically, O1A cannot be self petition. I'll try and break it down. I feel like there are three different ways of how you can go about O1. Number one is through your employer. So your employer can file for your O1A, like the most straightforward one. Second one is going to be through an agent, a US. based agent who basically acts on behalf of like multiple employers on engagement. So you have this agent and he files the O1 for you. And then the third one, again, I posted about this a few days back. USCIS issued like four guidance of O1A in like last 2 weeks essentially, which clearly mentions that if you have a company, if you own a corporation, then you can file an O1A for you through that corporation. So it's very strictly cannot be self petition, but there are like multiple different options through which you can kind of like
Mm.
almost 99% of the cases can file an O1 for you without an employer.
What you're gonna watch is an amazing story, but before you watch that, I just want to quickly say that all of these story, I compile the key insights from these stories and all the podcasts that I do, and I put this in my free exclusive newsletter community. Every week, more than 16,000 people receive my newsletter, and they love it. And here are some of the examples you can see. This was a podcast on George Mason universities, and you can see how to network and 10% cold emailing, powerful LinkedIn techniques, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in becoming part of this exclusive newsletter community, absolutely free. Link is in the description, or you can go to udj.com/newsletter. I'm also curious. Like I know we covered Team Jinee helping in terms of like EB1-A and people who need help with that profile. How how about O1? Like how does Team Jinee helps?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So I honestly like do not tell people to go only after after O1. We work with a lot of people who go after O1s because we have a lot of people who are on day one CPTs and they basically want to like get out of that entire day one CPT shebang. So it's going to be exactly the same in terms of like story, figuring out the criterias, working on final merits, focusing on trends. But we just what we'll eventually do in this case is like you start building your profile. Once we feel like you're ready for O1A, you should file for O1A, get your O1 sorted. But then there is nothing that stops you to continue building your profile for like another 6 to 12 months and then eventually also file for like EB1A. So while I understand in some situation O1 is the direct goal, which is good, I just feel like it does not make sense to like leave the battle half alone. If you're like already
Mm,
on this process and if you're enjoying the journey and if your O1A is approved, then why not like keep working and keep contributing in your field and then eventually also file for EB1A, unless you don't really need a green card, unless you don't want to live in United States. Your goal is to like just be able to like work for another 3 to 5 years. Your H1B wasn't picked, you do not really care about like getting a green card. Then there is no sense of like if you're
yeah.
like strictly doing it just to get a visa, then I don't think it makes sense. You just get your O1A, work, and the way we help is like first and foremost the goal is like to figuring out a story, like how exactly do we position you for this particular visa, where your extraordinary ability lies, then using the criteria to support the story that we're trying to like say to USCIS. Like you can say like, hey, I'm an amazing cricketer, but USCIS can take your words. So that's where criteria comes in to support the story that we have mentioned. Then focusing on final merits, because you also want to give a holistic look to your profile. So for example, if I enjoy playing cricket, then I would come back in the evening after work and have like a community club going on where I play with kids and whatnot. So like if you genuinely do enjoy what you do, then you'll have a lot of stuff in your profile which will not align with these criterias, because
Mm,
everything cannot be put into these criterias. These
mm,
criterias were created as like a guideline. So all those things which could be outside of those criterias but still aligns with the story that we are trying to tell, then we figure out what are those and then use that in the petition. And then finally understanding the trends, like a lot of things which I talked initially is like how you can use your own company right now, all the different things that USCIS come back with, make changes, and the results that we see in the petition, utilizing them to basically make sure like we are putting the best foot forward.
yeah. So in a nutshell, if let's say if I am someone who haven't got picked in H1B, or even regardless of that, I'm on my OPT and I'm like, I think my profile might be good enough to actually explore O1A, and I feel like I genuinely want to. Then I reach out to Team Jinee. The way to reach out to you is sending you an email, support at the rate geniegreencard.com. I'll put the link in the description. Sorry, I'll put the details in the description. Then you start working with them. Again, you guys do the consultation call. If everything aligns, you guys start working, and then this process goes until the whole profile is built up. then you guys don't, you're not a lawyer, so you guys then help them to connect with someone like a lawyer or something, and then do the petition, filing petition of that. And if there's an RFE, do you guys still help till then? Like where does the Team Genie like draws the line?
Yeah, so usually, like, I think the process would be is like we get the resume in, then we basically want to get on a call with them, try to understand what their situation is, their immigration situation, their work background, what have they done outside of that. Once we have a gauge of that, because like someone who's joining the program would also like to understand how long it's going to take, or where do they
Mm.
stand right now, what do they need to do in order to like reach the end goal if they're not there already. So that's why these calls are important. Then we start building up the profile. Once the profile is ready, then we have like partner attorneys. We work with like various different law firms. So we do that attorney introduction with them. We get on a call with the attorney. We kind of figure out the game plan. If the attorney feels like, hey, like maybe we could do XYZ, or there's something missing, then we basically like, because it's always good to get a third angle sometime, because it's like you and me consistently working on this particular thing. Someone else with a fresh perspective could have something new to add. So if that's there, usually it's not there, but maybe 5 to 10% cases it is there, we do that. Then we put the petition together with the attorneys. Takes like roughly 2 to 3 months to put the petition together. You file. In case of like O1A, if it's an RFE, we work with you, get the RFE sorted, work with the attorneys, all three of us like sit down, figure out a response, send it back. If there is a direct approval, in case of like an O1A, at that point you don't really need us. Sometimes people might need us to like find an agent or something like that. If they don't have the means, then we can help with like getting an agent or finding an agent for them. And then if it's an EB1-A, then usually like we want to make sure that you have an I-140 approved. You don't really need us for a 485 because the entire thing is done. Then all you need is to like just continue to like build up the uh, uh, go back to reach out to the attorney whenever your date is current and file the 485.
Okay. And obviously, the burning question that I have: what do my audience get if they end up using Team Genie? Uh,
They
what
get
can we do for
approved
them?
O1A visa.
That'll be amazing. If they get approved, that'll be amazing.
No, I think like for all of your coins, like usually like we have never charged any evaluation fees to like any of your members. So absolutely, like we will not charge anything in terms of like evaluation. So
Yeah.
we'll
So
pay
just
that.
send you guys an email. Send you an email with a, in the subject line, mention Yudi J, so that way they know that you
Right.
come from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Back to your agent question. It's very interesting, since it's slightly different than H1B, where you have a employer and they are just doing it. Again, O1A with an employer is pretty straightforward, but agent wise, who can be the agent? Who can act as an agent? And then, like, what are their requirements? Like, what do they like? Documents, anything? Like, what do they have to do?
Got it. So an agent can be any US based individual or a company. It could be a person or an entity who basically manage like freelance works or multiple contracts. So bear with me a little bit because like it's a little bit like complicated to explain, but essentially like let's say you are my agent. Let's say you are an American company, or let's say you are an American individual, right? Imagine, just think of it, just think of yourself as like a musician, right? Usually what musicians and actors, what these guys used to have was like an agent. The goal of these agents is to like source opportunities for them, and then within this agent he basically will prepare the itinerary of saying like, hey, like I'm working for like ABC. He's gonna be like doing this particular show here, this particular show here. These are like all his engagements, and I am the agent, so I want to file the petition for him. Similarly,
Mm,
what happens in the technical background is going to be like, hey, like I am an agent now. I can be a US person or a US entity, so I am an agent. I want to file O1A for my client XYZ. These are the three companies that he has an offer from where he will be working, and that's how this agent becomes. Now, to show what he's going to work on, those are called deal memos. So basically this person will have deal memos are like offer letters. They are like a one page document. I can even share you a sample if you want to like later on put it up here. I
okay.
think
Yes.
there's a lot of questions around deal memos, so I think it will be really helpful if we could put one up here. It's very basic, simple, like one page document which talks about like what does this employer do, what role they are offering him, how much will be the salary, how long he's going to be working with them. So essentially, two or three or four employers can basically like give him like an engagement. He could work on contract with them, he could work on a full-time position with them, and this agent files the petition for this particular individual because he kind of is like the connection between the employers and them. So that's basically what like a deal memo or a contract is, just detailing job duties, dates, compensation, and then you have to prove the agent's role in facilitating the, so the agent is just a facilitator in this case between like the employers and like in the individual. And then all of these documents, the I-129 is basically like submitted to USCIS.
Hmm. And do we have to show that this agent is going to make money off of me or anything like that? Because in real world, like if
Yeah.
I'm an actor,
Yeah.
agent would take like, I don't know, 10% or 20% of the deal. Like,
Yeah, these are all different scenarios. There could also be like an upfront fees, which is like, hey, like I hired this guy, I'm paying him like X bucks to find
mm,
opportunities for me, and he found, and like I've paid him. And then there could also be a cut in the contract, but that's something which is not USCIS is too much bothered
mm,
about. As long as like you just clearly show that this guy is a facilitator,
mm.
which attorneys are like really good at doing. So it's just a
And
formality.
if I go that route of agent based sponsorship,
Hmm.
that also probably mean that I can switch jobs easy. Like I'm not job dependent. Like if I want 1 year in Google, second year in Amazon, third year in Facebook, if I want to do job hopping.
Yeah, two things on that. Number one, I think the agent advantage is like, let's say if your employer is directly doing the O1 for you and you get laid off, then you are in similar situation like H1B. You
Mm,
need to find like another engagement. With the agent, you have a little bit of flexibility because he owns your O1 directly. You initially do want to work on the contracts that you have shared, at least for like a few months, but then eventually if you take up like a new contract, that's very easily doable because this guy can just, the agent can just simply amend the petition. The employer on their end does not need to be bothered, which is like the issue with most of these people trying to educate their employer, like how does O1A work, that sort of things.
Okay. So let's say someone who's watching this video, they're like pumped and they're like, I think I'm ready. I feel like I'm qualified. What's the first step they should be taking other
um
than reaching out to you?
Yeah, I guess like the first thing would be is like a lot of people like straight jump into criterias. So I feel like you should not do that. Don't
Mm,
jump into criterias. First, figure out what are you good at. Like how are you trying to present yourself? Don't go too broad. Figure out like a story about yourself. Figure out a specific niche. Most of the people that I talk to, they come up to me directly and say, like, "Hey, like I do XYZ. I have like three research papers. The research papers have no relation with the work that they're doing right now, so those research paper does not really matter because they do not add to like what you're doing right now. Similarly, you might have like an extensive research background, but what you're doing right now might not make sense. So you have to first figure out like a story, like keep it very specific. Another thing with overachievers usually is like when people have worked like with different companies, they're like, oh, I do this as well, oh, I do this as well, oh, I worked on XYZ as well, oh, not just this style, I did this as well. And I have to like constantly like bring them back into this psyche of like, I understand you have done a lot, but you need to pick and choose. You don't want to like be too broad. So number one would be is like figuring out a specific story, specific aspect of your profile which you think you're really good at. Then look into criterias, understand how each of those criterias work, what sort of evidence in those criterias works, and then
Can you
evaluate.
give me like maybe from your past
Yeah.
clients examples? Can you give like a specific example because it'll be helpful for people to like correlate with their story?
Basically I think like number one aspect is let's say for example like I can give my example, ignoring like everyone else. It's like um let's say like you want to focus on like what you do on a day-to-day basis, what projects are you working on, why are those projects important for your employer, and what does the end impact result of that particular project is. So for example, like the kind of stuff that I was working on was like those applications and softwares were basically used by truck drivers essentially around United States. And then like we were solving a lot of problems of like automating trucking operations. We were how an Amazon delivery system would basically like work, like when to pick up, when to deliver, which particular driver will drive which truck, when he will leave, what his manifest for the day is going to look like. So I kind of like went with the approach of like, I'm someone who automates trucking operations. I'm reducing supply chain bottlenecks. Because of my work, driver I now needs to be ELD compliant. They cannot drive over 14 hours because it will automatically get reported. So stuff like that. You basically want to talk about the impact of your work and not like, hey, I write amazing code. Like, that's super vague. So that's like the story aspect of it. Then you basically want to prove your critical role. Like, why are you playing a critical role? So you need to prove like the projects that you have been part of, how much revenue they generated, or if they did not generated revenue, why they were important internally, were they like responsible for the uptime of the platform, all those sort of things. Like, you kind of like want to use to like prove your critical role. Similarly, the second aspect is the remuneration side. How much money do you make? Are you in the 90th percentile within your field? And then you go about everything else. For example, authorship. Are you also doing any independent research around these subjects and creating algorithms? So for example, like I had a paper on cryptography from 2013. It had no relation to like what I was doing right now and the story I was like
Mhm.
creating for myself. So it does not make sense to have that paper included. So even though I might have a paper, it does not work in that case. So it needs to be like tied that down. So that's how like you kind of want to like think about the story and then individual criterias and how to support that particular story with your within your work and outside of your work.
Hmm. I have two like follow-up thoughts. Number one is this is also for my audience who's sitting in India right now, planning to come for masters. When should they start thinking about this? Because again, typical path is I'm gonna go on F1. So at that point of time,
Yeah.
they're only thinking about which university to pick. Then once they are here, they're only thinking about which internship I should get. Then they're only thinking about full time.
Yeah.
Then now they're in H1B cycle, and then the
Yeah.
first lottery happens.
Yeah.
Then is when they like really start to think about, and they have to do all of this work
Yeah.
at that point of time. What would you say? When should they start thinking about this and then start working towards the profile?
Yeah, I honestly feel like everyone is different in terms of like the people that I talk to. Usually, I'll start from like the last part. So usually, like people come to me where when they have like already drawn themselves, like when they're already on a day one CPT boat, they'll come to me. It's like, okay, we don't have any option. We need to go after O1. But now, since more people are like starting to get educated about this space, I will get people who are like, hey, Sahil, I have exhausted two H1B lotteries. I have one more left. So like now I want to think about O1 and get started on
Mhm.
O1.
Mm.
I just talked to someone who just graduated and has like all three H1B attempts left, but he was like, I want to join the program right now and prepare for O1 because I just don't want to do anything with like the H1B lottery. So even if it takes me
I
two
mean,
years, I said, okay,
and just to caveat this out, that this does not mean that you cannot participate in H1B. You
correct.
continue to participate
Yeah,
even after you get O1A. You should be able to continue to participate in H1B if you really want to go back to H1B. But like in your case, that example, that student was just really like proactive, and they're like, I don't want to be in this mess of H1B slash uncertainty, so I want to go with the O1A route.
yeah. And they're like also like when we create strategy, we kind of like think about like, okay, you have one more attempt left at H1B. Your STEM equity expires XYZ. So if the H1B does not go through, then we can file for O1 and then for EB1-A. But if the H1B does go through, there is no need to file for O1 as such right now. So every situation needs to be like strategized. And then for O1, you do not need to live in United States. So if you live in India and you have like you're outstanding within your field, you have been like doing a lot of good stuff, you also can like look towards the O1 path. And like instead of, because I know like a lot of people do not want to do a master's, but simply because they want to like have better career options, they have to get on F1. So if you are talented, if you have a lot of experience, if you're doing good stuff within your field, you can look into like upskilling yourself a little bit more and directly filing like O1 for yourself. But again, it's not going to be easy, especially when you're not in United States. It's going to be a little bit more effort. So that, just keep that in mind.
I want to talk about timeline because again, so that was my second follow up. Because let's say if someone did run out of two options or two attempts of H1B, now they're on their last attempt. They have about a year left on their STEM OPT. Is that enough time for them to survive and get the O1A approved, or like what does the timeline look like?
Yeah. So approval in itself is very quick. Like it takes couple of months, 3 months to put the petition together, and in premium processing, you get the decision back in 2 weeks. I do not think that's a problem. I think the problem is being at a place where you will get approved. Essentially, I think that's the challenge. So that's a little bit dependent on like everyone's starting point.
Mhm.
But usually, I think if you have exhausted like two H1B attempts, then I'm kind of assuming that you have like roughly like 2 to 3 years of work experience. If you have worked in India as well, so that could be like another couple of years of experience. So in that case, I think it could be anywhere between 6 to 12 months if you like put in like 5 to 10 hours a week at least.
And that 6 to 12 months is really collecting all the evidences
Correct,
for your profile so that your petition gets ready. So all of this is the preparation to file a petition, and filing petition and getting an approval, that's very quick, but
correct,
rest of it is what is going to take time.
right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I always joke with my attorney friends. It's like you guys have like the best life. Like we do all the hard work and then you just file.
Right. I also want to talk about cost. How expensive, like, I guess, what should be the budget they should have in mind that, okay, I've graduated now. How much money are we talking? Is it 5,000, 10,000, 20,000? Like, what's the money you're looking at?
Yeah, yeah. So it depends. So if their employer is willing to file for it, so for example, like if you file for H1B today out of your own pocket, you're probably looking at what, like 10, 12K in attorney fees and then
Yep.
USCIS fees. And if you do premium processing, so same goes for O1A. It's like the same exact thing. So it's just that if you pay it out of your own pocket, then that cost is on you versus the employer. So it's
Mhm.
pretty much the same. Only thing would be is like for O1A you do need to upskill yourself, so like spending time in with us, take our services, of course, like that's going to be like an additional cost that you'd have to look into.
Yeah. Okay. And then again, I know we've talked about it briefly, but just to clarify, the in O1A, um, there are 8 criteria, which is where, like, you are trying to build and collect like evidences for your profile
Correct.
to fit under one of these criterias. Can we share like one of these like what are these criterias, and then like what would be a good example of that?
Yeah, so the usually like I kind of like put them into an order of like I think number one is critical role, which I feel like is very crucial for a lot of these petitions. You basically want to prove that you have been playing critical role or have been working at like organizations, esteemed organizations in a critical capacity. So that's usually like one of the criterias. If you do not have a critical role in the past, then it might be difficult to get approved for O1. But it's not a very difficult criteria. Essentially, to win, we basically need like good letter of recommendations from people at your workplace right now that they can talk about, like they can vouch for you. That how great of a job you have done. It also a little bit depends on like if you have worked like a couple of different employers, then that helps as well. Or if you have like good numbers of years of experience behind your back, then that also helps. So that's number one. Number two is going to be high remuneration, which basically means that you can prove like you're in the 90th percentile of the people in terms of like money that you make. This I think is like more for EB1A. For O1, I do not think like it's too big of a deal to basically like look into high remuneration. If you have it, it's great because you can always like use that as an argument that like, hey, this guy is in demand, and you can kind of judge that based on like the money that he makes. Like he's making X amount of money because he's in demand. So that's like secondary aspect. Then you have authorship, which basically means like you have authored like scholarly articles, or you've written a book, or like anything related to your particular field that goes into authorship. Then you have original contribution. Original contribution I feel like is one of the most difficult criteria to find because it's very subjective, essentially. Because original contribution could be stuff that you have done at your work which did not existed before you, could count as original contribution at work. Stuff that you did outside of your work which other people were able to utilize, whether it's like your research work through citations, or whether it's citing your patents or utilizing your patents. or practical application of any research or product that you have created. All of those could basically go into like the original contribution aspect. Fifth is going to be judging. um,
Mm.
Judging is
Yeah.
a criteria which basically is there to kind of establish you that, hey, like this is someone whose opinion is valued by his peers. So that's where like judging comes in. You could, there's like a lot of different things like peer reviews, hackathons, competitions, all different sort of things like goes into like the judging criteria.
Mm.
um then you have membership, which basically means like you're part of like a certain selective group of people within your particular field. Membership cannot be paid, or they can be, I mean, technically it cannot be paid. It needs to have like some sort of like a selection criteria, without
Mm.
going too deep into it. There is another aspect to it, like sometimes you can pay and get like a base membership into an organization, but then you need to like move through the ranks and hold a certain position for that membership to count. Then you have press, which basically is like you or your work has been featured in media, pretty
Mm.
self-explanatory. um and then the last one is going to be awards, which is going to be like any awards that you have won within your particular field. One of the questions that I usually get is like, hey, I won XYZ at my work, like does that count? You can put it, I usually like to do put them in the petition because of two different reasons: not to win the awards category, but to kind of also show the critical role aspect of it. Because like if you're
Yeah.
winning
Yeah.
award, you kind of like probably are playing a critical role. So from that perspective it helps, and it also helps a little bit in terms of like a supporting evidence, and like overall holistic nature of your profile, because no one else is going to have that award. It's pretty
Mm.
unique to you, because no one else can come into your company and win that award. So even though it might not have very strong value in terms of like satisfying the awards category, but it could be valuable in general to have it in your petition.
Yeah. And I know in the EB1-A category, you mentioned you like to target not three, even though that is the minimum requirement. But is it same for O1 where you would like to target as many as you can, or is it just minimum three?
No, in all honesty, we don't even build profile from the perspective of O1. Like we build profiles from the perspective of EB1, so that
Mhm.
O1 becomes like a low hanging fruit. So that's usually what our approach is. If you'll see like some of my like a profile tracker that we share with clients, like to track where they are in the journey, we don't even have a profile tracker for O1. And clients always ask me like, Sahil, we do not have like a profile tracker, because I don't want them to like think like this is the goal. I want them to think of like this is the goal, and we keep an eye on like, okay, now these guys are ready for O1, and the timing is also right based on like their immigration situation. And I'll go and tell them like, okay, guys, we need to file for O1 now, and they're like, oh, but I was this is the track. I'm like, yeah, but that's for EB1A, not for O1A. So that's what I kind of like use. So like our O1A petitions are like really strong simply because we just kind of like use that as a step to EB1.
Yeah. So again, drawing the parallels with H1B. So in O1, you apply regardless of how you choose to apply. Premium processing 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, you get the result back. Let's say it's approval. In H1B, technically, again, change of status happen if you choose change of status, or consular processing, depending on what you choose. But for once you go outside United States, you have to come back with a stamp, and for stamp you need to do a visa interview. Is that same for O1?
Yeah, exactly the same. If you are in the US on another visa, you can do a change of status and transition to O1 without leaving the US. If you are outside, you'll receive a visa at a US consulate abroad. And then yeah, like if you do a change of status whenever you leave, you'll probably like need to get stamped.
And is there an interview for O1A?
Yes, if it's a COS, then usually like there is an interview that you would have to do.
What kind of things, like in H1B it's very specific to the work,
Yeah.
but what about O1?
Yeah, I think generally, I think interviews are typically required only during consular processing and not during change of status. During an interview, I think some questions could be like, "What makes you extraordinary in your field? Can you explain the nature of your work in the US? What evidence supports your extraordinary ability?" So I think it's crucial that you have like all of your original petition documents ready to present. It's crucial that you also understand like what case you presented to USCIS. And like the best practices for like a successful visa interview would be is like, review your petition, we be familiar with every detail, especially achievements and supporting evidence. Practice clear answers, explain your extraordinary ability and US work plans confidently, bring all the right documents, like the Form I-129 approval, the deal memos and everything. And obviously like just be calm and answer the questions honestly. So I feel like if you genuinely put together your petition and you know all the aspects of your petition, it's just a few questions that you can easily answer.
Hmm. And I'm assuming this, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming Team Jinee will be also helping once, if this is like an approval, and then okay, now I'm ready for interview. Like what
Correct.
do I practice?
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever there's like a consular processing, like we do like a 30-minute call to kind of like lay down and provide like a list of questions and
Mm.
things that they should keep in mind, and do like a couple of mock calls, so that they're prepared for the interview if needed. Usually they're not that bad, honestly, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, final question. What, let's say someone is watching this and they want to start working in it, what advice would you give them? Or what are some of the mistakes they should avoid when they are trying to think about this?
Oh man, there's so many. Probably, I think some of the common things that I've seen is like misinterpreting USCIS criterias. You won't believe, but I still get so many people who get on a call and their first thing is like, oh, I read online that you need so many citations, and like as soon as someone says that, I'm like, I need to like again spend 5 minutes trying to get his basics right first. Citations, so many people do not fight a case without citations is nothing, it's not even a criteria, it's a very small part of original contribution. It's only one way of proving original contribution, there are like 10 other ways of proving original contribution. So first and foremost, I think like understanding like how each criteria works is super important. Don't misinterpret them. Don't submit outdated or irrelevant evidence. For example, like the global recognition award and a few other stuff without naming them, like all those stuff does not work anymore. If anything, they just irritate the officer because they're tired of seeing like the same stuff. So don't do that. Failing to demonstrate like measurable contributions, like in your letter of recommendations, make sure like you're not talking vague. When these letters that you're receiving, you're talking about like measurable contribution that you are making, like what exactly changed because of your work. So I think, yeah, these are going to be like three or four major ones which I think majority of the people get wrong. So just focus on correcting those.
Yeah, amazing. Again, for anyone, if you are in that situation where you've already ran out of two attempts and H1B attempts, then this might be a good solution that you should start looking into. Or if you are like one of those students who Sahil mentioned, where you're on the first attempt of OPT, which is going to happen again in March, April, you might also want to start exploring this option. So that way you are certain. But regardless, Sahil, thank you so much for doing this. Enjoyed it. I know we're gonna continue to do more of these and deep dive into different topics and different visa categories. But again, super happy to have you here. Can't wait to have you again. Again, thank you, Sahil, for doing this. And for everybody, if you are someone who's wanting and help and want to expedite your process, at least like get some expert help, then highly recommend go to Sahil's team. You can email them support@jineegreencard.com. If you are someone seriously looking into this, highly recommend make sure to mention my name, so that way you can get your evaluation done, and of course Sahil or one of his team member will get on a call with you, explain the process and so on and so forth. But again, Sahil, can't wait to have you back. I know we will do more of these until our next one.
Keep smiling, keep hustling.